The trail dust still clung to Luke Carver's coat when he reined his bay gelding into the shade of a cottonwood and stepped to check the rear of his supply wagon. He'd hauled flour, beans, and salt from Dodge all the way to Coyote Ridge without incident, but the faint rustle from beneath the canvas made him freeze. The wind was dead still, no reason for a sound like that. He eased the flap back, and the smell hit him first. Unwashed skin, fear sweat, and the faint, sour tang of hunger. 4 small faces stared up at him from the dim, shadowed space between sacks of grain, eyes wide and ringed with dirt. The eldest, maybe 12, had one arm curled around a smaller boy whose cheeks were hollow as a dry creek bed. A little girl clutched something under her coat, a bundle of rags maybe, while the youngest, no more than 5, lifted his head just enough to whisper, so faint Luke almost missed it, "Don't kill us." The words landed heavier than a pistol shot. He crouched, keeping his hands open and low, feeling the horse shift uneasily behind him. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said steady, though their eyes told him they didn't believe it. The girl's grip tightened on her bundle, and he caught the gleam of tiny knuckles gone white with tension. "How long you been in there?" he asked, but none answered. The boy's lips moved, maybe a prayer, maybe just the dry rasp of thirst. Luke reached for the canteen hanging off the wagon rail, holding it out like an offering, and the eldest hesitated before taking it in quick, shaking gulps. It was then Luke noticed the bruises on the boy's wrist, thin, fresh, and shaped like shackles. His gut went cold. He'd seen marks like that before, on grown men chained for crimes they never committed, and sometimes on children taken for reasons far uglier. He scanned the horizon, suddenly aware of how quiet the prairie was, and how easy it would be for someone to come riding out of the scrub. "You from town?" he asked, and the boy's head snapped up quick, a flicker of panic in his gaze. Luke's mind worked fast. No family, no food, bruised wrists, and a hard truth pressed in. Someone had put them in that wagon, and it hadn't been for kindness. The girl spoke then, barely louder than the whisper before. "We thought you were with him." Luke's voice was gentle. "With who?" But the answer came in the form of a shadow moving along the ridge, a rider, too far to see his face, but the glint of a badge catching the sun told Luke enough. The children shrank deeper into the wagon, as if the sight of that badge was worse than any outlaw's gun. Luke dropped the canvas back over them and moved for the reins. Whoever the marshal of Coyote Ridge really was, Luke Carver had just stepped into a fight he couldn't ride away from. The rider's silhouette cut sharp against the midday glare as he came down off the ridge, the sun glinting off a badge pinned neat to a coat too new for the trail. Luke Carver kept one hand loose on his reins, the other resting casual on the wagon's side. But his mind was already measuring the distances: cottonwoods to the south, dry gully to the east, and open prairie everywhere else. None of it offered real cover if the man decided to search the wagon. Beneath the canvas, the children had gone still as stones, but Luke could hear the faintest hitch of breath from the smallest one. The bay horse flicked an ear, sensing the shift in his rider's pulse. The deputy, tall and self-sure, reined up a few paces away, tipping his hat like they were neighbors on a Sunday road. "Clay Voss," he said smoothly, "deputy to Marshal Greeley of Coyote Ridge. Making rounds for the welfare of travelers, stolen goods, and the like." Luke nodded, his voice easy. "Just hauling flour and beans west. No trouble here?" Clay's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mind if I take a quick look? Law says I can." Luke stepped down from the saddle slow, putting himself between the deputy and the wagon's tailboard. "Marshal still in town?" he asked. "He is," Clay replied. "Busy with a docket today. Vagrants, beggars, strays. He likes to get justice done before noon." The words sat wrong in Luke's gut. especially when he saw the faint marks on Clay's saddle, an auction yard brand from 2 counties over, the kind used on tack for men who spent big buying livestock or people. The canvas behind him rustled, and the eldest boy's dirt-brown eyes appeared for a flicker, wide and urgent. Luke gave the smallest shake of his head, then turned back before Clay noticed. "That a good town to pass through?" Luke asked. Clay's smile sharpened. "Good for some, profitable for others." It was then the girl's voice, thin and trembling, slipped out from under the tarp. "We thought you were with him." Clay cocked his head. "With who?" Luke asked, but the answer wasn't meant for him. The girl's gaze was on the badge, her lips tightening as she whispered, "He sold us at the courthouse." The words stopped Luke's breath cold. Not outlaws, not runaways. Children sold under the authority of the marshal himself. He kept his face blank, forcing a shrug. "Well, you can look, but I'd rather present my bill of lading to the marshal direct if it's all the same." Clay studied him like a man sniffing out a bluff. "Suit yourself, but I'll ride with you back into town. Make sure all's proper." Behind Clay, 2 more riders crested the ridge, silhouettes of men with rifles resting across their saddles, their approach slow but certain. Luke's old cattle dog Bristle padded from under the wagon, planting himself between Clay's horse and Luke, letting out a low, steady growl. Clay shifted in the saddle, eyes narrowing, hand brushing the butt of his revolver. Luke's gaze caught the corner of a cloth bundle poking from the girl's coat. A ledger with the courthouse seal stamped in black ink, tied with a bit of string and a tiny tin horse dangling from it. Evidence. Proof. And a death sentence if Clay saw it. The eldest boy's whisper came again, sharper this time. "Ma's in jail 'cause she wouldn't let him take us." The truth slid into place fast. The marshal had locked away the mother, sold the children, and these 4 had somehow gotten free. Clay's smile was gone now. "Lift the tarp, teamster," he said flatly. "Let's not waste daylight." The other riders were halfway down the slope, closing the trap. Luke's fingers brushed the wagon rope. If he cut it now, sacks of flour would spill like a storm, maybe buying 3 seconds, just enough for a man with a knife, a dog with sharp teeth, and 4 terrified children to disappear. 3 seconds could change everything. Luke's thumb found the frayed edge of the rope as Clay's gaze bore into him, the thud of the other rider's hooves growing louder in the still air. Bristle's growl deepened, a low warning that vibrated through the dust under Luke's boots. "Now," Clay said, his voice turning sharp, "lift the tarp." Luke gave a slow nod, stepping to the wagon's side like he meant to obey, but his mind was already counting beats. 1, his knife slid from its sheath. 2, the steel kissed the rope. 3, the cut was clean, and the lash gave way. In an instant, the sacks of flour pitched forward, bursting open against the ground in thick white plumes. Clay swore, his horse rearing as the clouds swallowed them, powder clinging to lashes, choking the air. Luke grabbed the tailboard, yanking it open just enough for the eldest boy to see daylight. "Out! Stay low!" he barked, voice tight but steady. The girl scrambled first, clutching her ledger and the tin horse that jingled faintly. The smallest boy slid into Luke's waiting arms, light as a sack of oats. Bristle lunged at Clay's mount, snapping at the stirrup leather, sending the deputy spinning sideways with a curse. Luke shoved the youngest under the wagon's frame toward the cottonwoods, then caught the arm of the last child as the thunder of hooves broke through the flour fog. One of the ridge riders burst into view, his rifle already swinging up. Luke ducked, yanking the boy down with him, feeling the heat of the bullet snap past his ear. He rolled, drawing his Colt now, and fired once, not to kill, but to crack the man's stirrup strap. The rider pitched sideways into the dirt, the rifle tumbling free. The eldest boy was already at the cottonwood line, waving frantically for the others. Luke shoved the second boy toward him, then scooped the youngest under one arm and ran, Bristle darting ahead in short, sharp bursts to herd them like cattle. Behind them, Clay's voice cut through the chaos. "They're Marshal's property! Stop them!" The words made Luke's stomach churn, but they bought him seconds. The other rider hesitated, unsure if a bullet in a child was worth the order. Luke used it, diving into the gully and dropping hard into the cool shadow of its banks. He pushed the children ahead, keeping low as Bristle trotted backward beside him, ears flat, eyes bright. Clay's shape appeared at the gully rim a moment later, flour dust turning him ghost pale, badge glinting through the haze. "You're making a mistake, Carver," he shouted. Luke didn't answer. His boots slid in loose gravel as they pushed deeper into the cut, the sound of the second rider's hooves trailing above them. The girl's breathing was ragged, and Luke could feel her hand shaking around that ledger. "Hold on to it," he murmured, "no matter what." The gully curved and narrowed until they were walled in by red earth. For a moment Luke feared it was a dead end, but Bristle bolted, ahead, and vanished through a slit barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Luke pushed the children toward it, hearing Clay's men dismount above. Rocks tumbled down. The hunt had gone to ground now. As the last boy scrambled through the slit, Luke glanced back once. Clay stood at the rim, silhouetted against the sun, 2 more riders appearing behind him. Luke met his eyes across the distance, and in that moment the deputy's calm smile was gone, replaced by something colder. Possession denied. Then Luke ducked into the rock slit, the shadows swallowing them whole. The slit in the rock swallowed them into a cool, twisting gap, the walls damp with seepage, smelling faintly of sage and iron. Luke's shoulders scraped stone as he guided the children single file, Bristle slipping ahead with the ease of something born wild. The girl clutched her ledger so tight the tin horse trinket left a faint line across her palm. Behind them, the muffled voices of Clay and his riders echoed faintly, searching, not yet certain where the trail had gone. The gap widened into a pocket of shadow where sunlight speared down through a crack above, dust drifting like lazy snow. That's when Luke saw him, a tall, raw-boned figure leaning against the wall, hat brim low, a sharp's rifle cradled in his arms. His eyes, sharp and pale as river ice, studied Luke for a heartbeat before dropping to the children. "You're running from Greeley's men," he said, not a question. Luke's hand tightened on his Colt. "Depends who's asking." The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Name's Eli Ward. I've been tracking those bastards for a week. They took my sister's boy last month, sold him like stock." The eldest boy stepped forward, eyes wide. "We saw him," he said. "He's in the courthouse basement." Eli's gaze flicked to Luke, measuring him again. "If you're keeping them, you're already marked. You got a plan?" Luke glanced at the crack of sky above. "Get them somewhere Clay won't find." Eli shifted his rifle, the movement easy, practiced. "Then you're coming with me. There's a way out they don't know, but it runs close to town." The youngest boy whimpered at that, but Bristle pressed his head into the child's side, steadying him. Eli crouched, speaking low. "You've got something they'll want back bad," he said, nodding at the girl's bundle. She hesitated, then loosened the string enough to show the ledger's courthouse seal. Eli's eyes hardened. "That's the auction book. Names, prices, dates. If that gets to the territorial judge, Greeley hangs." Luke exhaled slow. "Then we keep it out of their hands." Footsteps scuffed at the far end of the slit, echoing closer. Eli jerked his chin toward a narrow cut leading downhill. "Move, I'll cover." Luke herded the children ahead, Bristle taking the lead, while Eli melted into the shadow near the slit's mouth. The moment they slipped into the lower gully, a shot cracked above, then another, Eli's rifle speaking sharp and true. Luke didn't look back, just kept the children moving until the gully spat them into a dry wash choked with willow scrub. The noise of the shots faded, replaced by the rush of distant water. "Where's he taking us?" the eldest boy asked, breathing hard. "Someplace safe," Luke said, though his eyes kept sweeping the wash for movement. Eli caught up moments later, rifle slung, a fresh nick in the brim of his hat. "Bought us a mile," he said. "After that, it's open ground. We'll need a distraction." Luke's mind worked fast. The flour sacks were gone, but he still had oilskin packets of salt pork in the wagon bed, if the wagon was still standing. And maybe, just maybe, a way to turn Clay's hunger for the ledger into a trap. "I've got an idea," Luke said, "but we're going to have to walk right into the marshal's shadow." The girl hugged the ledger closer, the tin horse swinging like a silent pendulum. Above them, the sky was sliding toward late afternoon, shadows stretching long, and every step toward safety meant stepping deeper into danger. The wash spit them out into a stretch of brittle grassland, the air still carrying the faint tang of gun smoke from Eli's cover fire. Luke kept the children moving single file, Bristle pacing beside the youngest like a guard on a chain. Eli walked at the rear, eyes scanning the ridges, rifle loose in his hands. "We can't skirt Coyote Ridge," Luke said under his breath. "They'll have riders strung in every direction by sundown. The only place they won't expect us is the place they own." Eli shot him a sideways look. "You're talking about walking them straight into the courthouse." Luke nodded once. "If we take the side alley, there's a storeroom entrance under the east steps. I've used it before. No one posts it, because they think no one's fool enough to get that close." The eldest boy stumbled over a rock, catching himself on Luke's arm. "They'll see us," he said, voice breaking. "Not if we look like we belong," Luke replied. He took a moment, stripping the trail dust from his coat with a few sharp shakes, brushing dirt from the boys' shirts, and tugging the girl's bonnet low over her eyes. "We're a ranch hand, and his kin bringing supplies to the docket. Keep your heads down, don't speak," Eli grunted, tightening his hat strap. This better be more than a gamble. They reached the town's outskirts as the sun began to slant gold, lighting the clapboard buildings like painted scenery. Smoke curled from chimneys, and somewhere a hammer rang against an anvil. Luke kept his stride steady, steering them toward the east side where the shadows were deepening. The courthouse loomed at the center, its whitewashed walls catching the last blaze of day, the American flag limp in the still air. Luke's jaw tightened at the sight of two children sweeping the steps under the eye of a deputy, not Clay, but the same polished boots and smug stance. As they crossed into the alley, Bristle stayed tight to Luke's leg, head low, tail still. Eli moved ahead to the iron service door half hidden under the stairs. "Locked," he muttered after testing the handle. Luke pulled a thin sliver of metal from inside his boot, a habit learned from hauling freight through towns where padlocks kept more honest men out than thieves. 2 quick twists, and the latch gave. They slipped inside, the cool dark swallowing them. The air smelled of paper, dust, and something faintly sweet, maybe the leftover scent of fruit stored in barrels. A single oil lamp burned at the far end, throwing a warm circle on the ledger desk. Luke froze. Behind it sat a man in shirt sleeves, spectacles perched on his nose, scratching a quill across a page. He looked up. and for a moment there was only the squeak of his chair as he rose. "You're not supposed to be." Eli's rifle came up, the words dying in the clerk's throat. "We don't want trouble," Luke said quickly. "Just a quiet place to pass through." Fontourse, clerk's gaze flicked to the girl's bundle. His lips pressed thin. "That book belongs to the court." The girl shook her head fiercely. "It belongs to my ma." Outside, heavy boots clattered down the courthouse steps, the sound of men heading for horses. The clerk's eyes darted towards the noise, then back to Luke. "If you're going to move, do it now," he hissed, stepping aside. Luke ushered the children past, heart hammering. The ledger's weight felt heavier than ever, not just in the girl's arms, but in what it could do if it reached the right hands. As they slipped into the narrow corridor behind the storeroom, Eli murmured, "That clerk knows which side he's on. Question is, will he still feel that way when Greeley finds out?" The corridor spilled them into a cramped brick passage that smelled of damp mortar and coal smoke. The narrow slit of daylight ahead, leading to an unmarked yard between the courthouse and the freight office. Luke motioned for the children to stay tight, his hand resting lightly on Bristle's back as the dog's ears pricked toward the opening. Eli swept the yard with his eyes first, then stepped out and stopped dead. Luke followed, and his stomach clenched. Marshal Greeley was standing less than 20 paces away, a broad-shouldered man in a tailored coat far too fine for frontier dust, his badge polished to a blinding shine. 2 deputies flanked him, rifles sloped casual but ready. Greeley's gaze slid over the children like a rancher counting head. "Mr. Carver," he said in a voice smooth as oiled leather. "I've heard of you. You've been busy this afternoon." Luke's jaw tightened. "Just moving freight." Greeley smiled faintly, eyes flicking to the ledger clutched in the girl's arms. "And passengers, it seems. Now, here's the thing. Those children are wards of the court, pending placement in respectable homes. You've mistaken your role in this matter." The eldest boy stepped closer to Luke, small shoulders squaring. "You're lying," he said. "You sold us." Greeley's smile didn't falter, but the warmth in his eyes vanished. "Children," he said softly, "ought not speak about things they don't understand." Eli's rifle came up a fraction, but Luke shook his head minutely. There were too many guns in too tight a space. Greeley took a slow step forward. "Mr. Carver, you're not on any docket, not under any suspicion. Walk away now, leave the little ones with me, and you'll ride out of Coyote Ridge untouched." The offer landed heavy. He was giving Luke a door to safety, and daring him to close it. Luke's mind ticked through the facts. 4 children against 3 armed men, a ledger that could hang the marshal, and nowhere to run that wouldn't put them in a rifle's sight. Bristle gave a low, steady growl, the kind he used on rattlesnakes. Luke spoke evenly. "Seems to me, if you wanted me gone, you'd already have your men take them." Greeley's smile widened, but it didn't touch his eyes. "A man like you has uses. You've got a reputation for keeping your word, and for finding things. I'll make you a deal. Bring back the boy who escaped from me last week. Eli's nephew, isn't it? And I'll forget today happened." Eli's face went cold, his grip tightening on the rifle. "You're not bargaining with me, Greeley." The marshal ignored him, watching Luke. "You've got until sundown tomorrow. Refuse, and I'll hunt you, the dog, and every brat you've got tucked behind you until there's nothing left to find." The yard went still except for the creak of leather as one of the deputies shifted. Luke felt the children pressing closer, the youngest's small hand gripping his coat like it could anchor them all. Greeley adjusted his hat, the sunlight glinting off the badge. "Think on it, Carver. Sometimes the only way to save some is to trade others." With that, he turned and strode toward the street, his men falling in behind him, boots ringing on the packed earth. Luke didn't move until the sound faded. Eli's voice was low and bitter. "He's daring you to pick which child dies first." Luke looked at the girl's bundle, the courthouse seal stark in the fading light. "No," he said finally. "He's daring me to prove he can bleed." They slipped through the back lanes of Coyote Ridge with the sun burning low, the air cooling fast, and the smell of wood smoke curling out from the cook stoves along the street. Luke kept the children between him and Eli, Bristle padding guard at the flank. The marshal's offer still rattled in his skull, not because it tempted him, but because it laid out the stakes plain. Greeley didn't just want the children back. He wanted anyone who dared to take them. "You really thinking of giving him what he asked?" Eli murmured when they turned into the shadows of the freight yard. "I'm thinking about using what he asked for," Luke replied. He crouched beside an abandoned wagon near the corral, checking the contents. Half-empty crates, some oilcloth, and a broken harness. He took the oilcloth and began wrapping it around one of the crates. "He'll send men to watch every road out of town," Luke continued. "But he won't expect us to walk into the open with something he thinks is worth more than 4 kids. That ledger." The girl's eyes narrowed as she hugged the bundle tighter. "You're not giving it to him." Luke shook his head. "Number. But we can make him think he's about to get it." Bristle's ears twitched, and he trotted to the alley mouth, sniffing the air before returning, tail low. Luke took that as a warning. Riders were moving in the streets nearby. "We'll need a decoy," Luke said. Eli glanced at the crates. "You want to plant a fake ledger?" Luke nodded. "Wrap it in burlap, tie the tin horse to it, make sure it rattles like papers. Then we choose the place he'll want to take it, somewhere with one way in and no easy way out." Eli's mouth curled into a grim smile. "That old livery stable by the arroyo. Roof's half gone, but the ground floor's boxed in tight. We can funnel them." Luke turned to the eldest boy. "You, me, and Bristle will carry the fake into the open. Eli, you take the others and circle wide. When they come for me, you cut them off at the stable doors." The boy swallowed hard, but nodded. The girl helped tie the tin horse to the oilcloth-wrapped crate, her fingers lingering on the toy a second before letting it go. "They'll kill you for this," she whispered. "Not if we do it right," Luke said. They moved quickly, weaving through the back ways until the crumbling livery came into view, its whitewashed boards gray with age. The arroyo beyond it was a steep drop. One wrong step in the dark could snap a horse's legs. Luke positioned himself in the stable doorway, the fake ledger under one arm, Bristle pressed against his boot. The sun dipped behind the ridge, shadows spilling across the yard. Hoofbeats came first, slow, measured, then the shape of Clay Voss emerging from the gloom, 3 more riders fanning behind him. His smile was thin. Marshal figured you'd see sense. Luke said nothing. Just let the fake ledger shift in, his grip so the tin horse gave a faint jingle. Clay's eyes flicked to it like a moth to flame. "Hand it over, and maybe I'll let you walk." Luke backed into the stable's dark mouth, Bristle's growl rising like distant thunder. Clay dismounted, the other men following, their boots scuffing in the dirt. They didn't see Eli yet, or the loop of rope hanging above the rafters ready to drop the doors. Luke's pulse steadied. This was it, a single step more, and the trap would spring. Clay stepped into the gloom of the livery, his boots crunching on straw and splintered wood, the faint squeak of the tin horse swinging from the fake ledger pulling his focus like a fishing line, drawing in a trout. Behind him, the 3 riders fanned wide, rifles low but ready, the smell of horse sweat and gun oil thick in the air. Luke eased back toward the center of the stable, letting their eyes adjust to the dark. Bristle stayed crouched against his leg, the slow, deliberate growl vibrating through the floorboards. Clay's gaze never left the bundle in Luke's arm. "Smart man," he said softly. "Don't know why you made it so hard." Luke let the corners of his mouth twitch like he might agree, then gave the smallest nod toward the rafters. Above, Eli yanked the rope, and the heavy plank doors at the far end slammed shut with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. At the same time, a weighted beam swung down from the rafters, knocking one of the riders sprawling into a pile of hay. Bristle lunged, teeth flashing, driving another man back toward the wall. Luke pivoted, his Colt clearing leather, and fired a single round into the dirt at Clay's feet, enough to send him stumbling. Eli burst from the shadows, rifle butt cracking into the jaw of the third rider, sending him to his knees. It was over in seconds, or it should have been. The creak of a saddle outside froze Luke's next breath. Marshal Greeley's voice rolled into the stable like a cold wind. "Stand down, boys. Seems we've caught ourselves a private gathering." Clay's eyes lit with something ugly as the marshal's tall frame filled the doorway, the late light cutting a halo around his hat brim. 2 more deputies flanked him, both with rifles leveled. "Drop the guns," Greeley said, his tone pleasant, almost fatherly. Eli's jaw clenched, his rifle still aimed. "You outnumber us," the marshal continued, "but that ain't why you're gonna lose. It's because you can't pull that trigger without killing one of those little darlings you're so keen on saving." Luke's stomach sank. The children were huddled just behind the feed bin, visible now in the last light seeping through the gaps in the boards. The marshal's eyes found the bundle in Luke's grip, the tin horse winking once as it swayed. "That's mine," he said simply. Luke knew in that moment the trap had worked on Clay, but failed on the man who mattered. Greeley didn't care about the chase, didn't care about the fight. He wanted what was in Luke's hands, and he'd burn the building to the ground to get it. "Tell you what," Greeley said, stepping forward. "I'll let you ride out with the children if you leave the book. No questions, no warrants, no blood." His deputies shifted their rifles. Eli's eyes flicked to Luke. It was the choice again, only sharper. Trade the weapon that could end Greeley's racket, or walk them all into a storm of lead. Bristle growled louder, stepping forward until he stood between Luke and the marshal, teeth bared. Luke tightened his grip on the bundle and shook his head. "You don't get to buy your way out this time." Greeley's smile thinned to nothing. "Then I'll take it the hard way." His hand dropped to his pistol. The same instant, Luke kicked the oil lantern at his feet toward the straw pile by the wall. Flames leapt fast, orange and hot, smoke curling into the beams. The stable was about to turn into a furnace, and the only way out was through the marshal himself. The lantern's oil caught in a rush, flame racing up the wall and licking across the rafters like a hungry beast. Heat slammed into the stable, thick smoke rolling down to meet it, and the sudden chaos broke whatever careful aim the marshal's men had. Bristle barked furiously, darting toward the children, herding them behind the feed bin where the smoke was thinner. Clay cursed and lunged for Luke, but Eli's rifle stock cracked across his shoulder, sending him staggering into a pile of burning straw. One of the deputies fired blindly, the shot chewing into a post inches from Luke's head. The sound jolted the children into a sobbing scramble, their small hands clutching the boards. "Out the front!" Luke shouted, but Greeley stepped into the doorway, revolver drawn, the firelight throwing his shadow long and black across the dirt floor. "Nobody leaves," the marshal said, his voice calm despite the rising roar of flame. Eli swung his rifle toward him, but Greeley fired first, the shot tearing the brim from Eli's hat and burying itself in the wall. Luke dove sideways, rolling into the thick of the smoke, the fake ledger still under his arm. The marshal's eyes tracked him through the haze, his boots steady even as sparks drifted down around him. Luke heard the children coughing, choking, and made his move, grabbing a half-broken pitchfork and driving it into the dirt between them and the marshal's line of fire, sending up a fresh spray of dust and ash. Bristle leapt through that cloud, snapping at the leg of the nearest deputy, yanking him off balance. Eli seized the moment, slamming his shoulder into the man and knocking his rifle away. Clay came up again from the side, face twisted in rage, and tackled Luke, his fingers clawing for the bundle. They crashed into a water trough, the stale, cold water splashing over them. Luke slammed an elbow into Clay's ribs, breaking his grip, then shoved him backward into the flames creeping along the hayloft ladder. A beam cracked above, half burning, and fell between Greeley and the rest of his men, forcing the marshal to step back. "Go!" Luke roared, scooping up the smallest child under one arm while pushing the others toward Eli. They bolted through the gap the falling beam had made, Bristle snapping at their heels to keep them moving. Greeley tried to follow, but the fire surged between them, the heat curling the badge on his chest into a dull gleam. His voice carried after them, low and cold. "You can't run far enough, Carver." They burst into the cool night air, lungs dragging in the blessed oxygen, and sprinted for the arroyo's edge. Luke didn't stop until they were halfway down its steep bank, shielded by the dark and the winding walls. Behind them, the livery's roof caved in with a roar, sparks spiraling into the starlit sky. The children huddled close, shivering in the sudden quiet, and Eli wiped soot from his eyes, glancing at the bundle still clutched in, the girl's arms. "You could have dropped it," he said to Luke, "and left him free?" Luke shook his head, watching the flames die in the distance. "Number this doesn't end until he can't buy or sell another soul in this town." The eldest boy looked up at him then, his face streaked with ash, and for the first time since the wagon, there was something in his eyes besides fear. They moved through the arroyo by starlight, the air heavy with the mingled scents of dust, smoke, and scorched timber. Bristle padded ahead, pausing at each bend until Luke gave a low whistle to signal all clear. Behind him, the children walked close together, their small hands brushing one another like they feared breaking apart would make them vanish. Eli took the rear, scanning the rim for silhouettes, but the night was empty save for a coyote's distant yip. Luke kept them moving until the arroyo widened into a dry crossing where a single cottonwood leaned against the sky. Beneath it stood a wagon hitched to a gray mule, the lantern on its shaft burning low. An older woman in a plain calico dress waited by the wheel, her face lined but steady, eyes sharp as glass. "You Carver?" she asked without preamble. Luke nodded. "Judge Hollis said you'd meet us." She stepped forward, her gaze flicking over the children before settling on the bundle in the girl's arms. "That's the book?" The girl hesitated, then handed it over. The woman didn't open it. She simply tucked it into a satchel and tied the flap tight. "This will hang him," she said. "But you need to be gone before daylight." Luke glanced north, where the hills faded into shadow. "They'll send riders before sunup." She nodded. "I'll take them to the judge myself. You've done your part. Now don't die for it." Luke crouched to face the children. The eldest boy tried to stand stiff, but his lip trembled. "We can't go with you?" Luke shook his head gently. "You're safer with her. She's got the law that Greeley can't buy." The boy nodded, swallowing hard, then surprised Luke by throwing his arms around him. The smallest child copied him, clutching Luke's coat until Bristle nudged his shoulder, tail swishing slow. The girl stepped forward last, her tin horse dangling from its string. "You gave me back my ma's book," she said quietly, "so I want you to have this." She pressed the toy into his palm. Luke closed his fingers around it, feeling the cool shape of its tiny legs and wheels. "I'll keep it," he promised. The woman ushered the children into the wagon, settling them under a blanket. Eli clapped Luke on the shoulder. "We could ride with them." Luke shook his head. "Greeley won't be in that wagon. He'll be looking for us." They stepped back as the mule started forward, the wagon's lantern swaying gently in the dark. The children's faces, pale in the light, stayed turned toward Luke until distance swallowed them. For a long moment he stood there, the night pressing quiet around him. Eli broke it first. "What now?" Luke opened his hand, the tin horse catching a glint of starlight. "We make sure he knows this isn't over." He slipped it into his pocket, a weight both small and unshakable. Bristle barked once, low and certain as if agreeing. They climbed the arroyo's far bank. The road. Ahead, a thin silver line under the moon, leading west into country where Greeley's badge meant nothing. But Luke knew the marshal's reach was long, and that the fight had only begun. Still, for tonight, the children were safe. The ledger was on its way to justice, and the tiny tin horse rattled softly in his pocket like a promise kept.